And we are live. Live. Cool. Excellent connection. Stream health looks good. Perfecto. Good morning. So today is the 8th brew with the beans that we've been using, the dark roasts, and it's the Lord and Lady dark roast. Today we're going even deeper into brewing ratios, and we're trying a lower one, which is a 1:8 brewing ratio. I didn't fully fix my whiteboard because, as a viewer mentioned, my math is faulty over here, so I thought I would just do it on stream instead. So 8 times 30 is not 270, it's 240. So I'll just rejig this and make it look proper and good. But yeah, we're going 2 notches down in the brewing ratio to a 1:8 brewing ratio. And we're also upping our dose to 30 grams instead of 25, just to try to keep that water amount kind of the same so that the brewing time doesn't shorten way too much. So let's fix this whiteboard like so. Remove this. So we have a 1:8 brewing ratio, and we're using 30 grams of coffee, and the water amount is 240, like so. And temp was 85, right? Yes. 85 degrees Celsius. Like so. So we'll be using a 1:8 ratio with 30 grams of coffee, 240 grams of water temperature of 85, and a grind size of 37. Let's begin. I'll put this right over here. So first we measure out our beans. 30 grams. Oh yeah, and another thing that I'll be doing with this brew, I'm actually going to use a different filter. So this one is a bit slower than the one that I've been using, and I have a feeling it will work a bit better with this lower ratio brew. So I'm going to use this one to try to extract a bit more from the coffee by having the liquid be in contact with the coffee a bit longer. So this is what we've been using. This is what I'm going to use today. .30 grams of coffee, like so. .30 grams on the dot. And we'll get our cup like so. Filter on top, and we'll preheat this, meaning we need to get our kettle. Kettle, preheat. Like so. There. Like so. Toss in the grinds. So, question, SM Testa. How often do you clean boil those cloth filters? So I tried to clean them after every brew pretty much, so I rinsed them with my hands and kind of like put them under the sink and make them. So this is, for example, from yesterday. I just put it on this under the sink, but every now and then I do boil them in water to really release the pores and refresh them. So well, yeah, within the bean that I'm using, I'm totally fine with using the same filter. But once I start swapping beans and using a new filter, or I'm retiring it and using paper filter for a while or something else, then I clean these filters. So it's not like every other day or anything. It's more like when I change my bag. When I go from two different bags, I will clean and boil my fabric filter. So hand wash during the bag, and then fully boil when a bag is done. That's my process. So when this is done, I'll boil these two filters and fully refresh them. Like so. Here, I'll try some filter water for you. It's obviously not delicious, but for science. Yeah, it doesn't taste good. So for now, let's aim to lower our water temperature to 85. So. 88. One more dash. To the timer. So we'll be pouring around 60 grams of water for the bloom, and then we'll pour all the way up to 110-ish, 120 for the second pour, and then we'll be pouring the remaining 240 for the last pour. Do you think that the taste gets in the cup? This has always been my concern when using cloth filters. To be honest, I think it's fine as long as you clean it every now and then. So it's really like how anal you want to be about it. So I've realized that this over here is really just a byproduct of some fines being in the filter, but it's not really like imbuing too much bad taste into the final brew, because there's just so much happening there anyways. But yeah, I would say try to clean them after every bag at least. Make sure that they're properly like boiled and given some TLC, because having beans crossed from different like types of beans into other brews, that becomes an issue for sure. And it just clogs the pores and everything. So yeah. Okay, let's begin. Before the water cools down too much. So pouring. Here we got 60 grams. But I do think that that is just a part of fabric filters. You know, you gotta maintain them, you gotta clean them, you gotta make sure that they are as good as can be, because they do die out. Like if you use a filter constantly, I would say like a lifespan is like a year. Compared to something like a metal filter that you can use all the time, that never really goes bad. And paper that is one-time use. So I can tell with the thicker filter that it's kind of like overflowing a bit here. Like it's not getting that big mushroom that I want yet. Small volcano happening. And now we do the circles. Yeah, I gotta pour even slower with this filter. There we go. 240. And then remove this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. David says, I just cut out squares of muslin cloth as my filters, so I usually have a dozen or so in hand that I can single use before having to boil. In practice though, it's overkill. I usually rotate 2 to 3 at a time, hand wash. Yeah, that's my technique, just hand wash, but I use it more like 6, 7 times, and then I give it a boil, depending. Because I got 2 fabric filters right now, and I've been using this one and this one for this bag, and we're at our 8th brew with these beans over here, and it's like 2 more in here, which would mean around like 6, 7 brews per filter going on. One thing about fabric filters though is that even though it is a bit more maintenance and TLC that you need to give it, the cup of coffee that it provides has a body that you can't really get with other filter types like paper or metal, because it doesn't let sediments through like metal, but it has the same amount of oils. Well, compared to paper, paper really catches a lot of those oils, while fabric filter lets through a lot of those oils. So you'll get a cup that is not sedimenty, but pretty high in mouthfeel. So yeah, there are some downsides with fabric filters, but in my opinion, it's probably one of the more tastier ones, unless you're going into super high brewing ratios, where you want that tea-like consistency, where it's super silky and smooth. Okay, let's stir our coffee. So we got the 1:8 ratio. It looks pretty dark compared to the other ones. Probably can't see it, but it just has like an extra tint of darkness in here. Let's give this a... Yeah, so it's pretty drying on my mouth. The taste now is a bit too intense and not in a good way. Dark like a stout? No, not really. I'm more like dark like a 85% small bit of chocolate that has been put into my mouth now and is drying up the area. So it's not like a refreshing dryness and a refreshing darkness. It's more a raspy dryness and not enjoyable one. So when we were playing around with 1 to 10 and 1 to 12 and a bit higher brewing ratios, I think the water got time to do its thing and actually extract the coffee properly, because right now I feel like it's a mix of like under extraction and just not enough time to do its thing, which is giving this kind of like raspy dryness to my mouth. And it also has a lot of like coffee roasting notes, which is then blended into, but those aren't getting a time to shine because of the intensity of the other elements. So what I can say is that it's a concentrated liquid, but it's not a tasty concentrated liquid. It's more just pretty harsh. Yeah, and normally my tongue and upper mouth doesn't have that much of a dryness to it, even with these dark roast beans. But this one, it is really coating my whole mouth with a lot of dryness. So let's just try to add a dash of water and see what happens. Electric Wuhendishi. Hi, oh, you were the one who commented on my mistake with the math. Thanks. Hi, when using a fabric filter on V60, I see that filter doesn't stick to walls of the dripper properly. So what about the specifically designed channels of V60? Are they useless? It does stick. Like, it doesn't like hover over it or anything, but it does still do its thing. And I think that, you know what, those speed ribs and like so he's talking about these inner ribs over here that promote flow. I think that it's kind of a marketing thing, unless you're using a Chemex where it creates a full-on seal, but it's like overkill sometimes for these things over here. And that's my personal opinion, because I've had other brewers, for example, that aren't full-on ribbed all the time, and they can do their own thing too. But yeah, so what I'm saying is that the channeling is not an issue with fabric filters, and even with the Chemex, it's just a part of like the process on the brewer where the filter is snug with the side of the wall, so you just kind of like compensate for that aspect with your recipe and your variables. So grind a bit coarser with the Chemex and stuff. But I haven't had an issue where the fabric filter is like clogging up or slowing down because of the speed at which the liquid drains out because of the ribs. It's more been because of the thickness of the fabric or other variables. So I wouldn't say they're useless. They're there. They're adding a bit of speed to the flow, but I wish there was a way to calculate it because I haven't seen them be vital for my brews. But I think that should be like a cool test. Like, see if we can put a filter on the speed lines and then one that is like hovering asymmetrically on in the brewer to see what flow differences are with those two, because I'm pretty sure that a big chunk of the filter is still touching those lines, but it's just like on the, for example, where the seam hits the sewing here. I think maybe here it doesn't like fully hit the lines, but everywhere else it should probably hit the lines pretty consistently. Are the ribs not there to provide airspace so it drains better, so it's not touching? Yeah, that's one of the things that it does too. And I know that for a fact in Chemex, if you create a full-on seal, as in the mouth of the Chemex is also covered by the filter, what happens is that it will not drain properly. So some people have like this chopstick technique or something that they put a chopstick there to keep a small gap going. But speaking of space in between the filter and stuff, I do think that the ribs on the Hario V60 are supposed to promote quicker flow. And you can kind of see it in a transparent one where when you look at it, you'll see these droplets of liquid like speeding down the inner ribs, but I'm not fully sold on it, is what I'm saying. Like, I'm sold on not creating a seal so that it doesn't fully like have any air pockets, but having ribs for speed. So there's another one that has like way more ribs too, and I really wonder if those have a big impact in the speed of the brew. Yeah, speed test. Go on google.com, write a speed test, check my internet. Gonna add some more water, see if it does anything. So overall, quite underwhelmed with this cup. It was kind of what I expected. Like, I know that if I keep on pushing the brewing ratio lower and lower, there comes a point where the cup quality breaks, so the concentration is pretty high, but the overall taste and the deliciousness of the cup of coffee goes pretty down low. So it's not better that it's thick and viscous, it just means that the liquid is more concentrated, but it just didn't have time to like extract those sugars, it didn't have time to balance out the cup properly, and it just turns into a not pleasant cup of coffee. lower, you might have to go immersion. Yeah, but even with immersion brewers, I don't think I know any immersion brewers that brew in the 1:8 brewing ratio. If I want to go like even lower, I think it's the like mocha pot and things that use very fine grinds but have a way to compensate for it. So the pressure that mocha pots provide create a quicker extraction, which then allows you to brew in lower brewing ratios. Same with AeroPress, for example. You can press it out and use a very fine grind, and it is possible to make delicious cups of coffee at that low brewing ratio because you can speed up the extraction in other ways that is provided by the brewing device. The full-on other side of the spectrum is like espresso, where the bar pressure and the water pressure that you're adding to the extremely fine beans can compensate for that low brewing ratio of 1:2. And that's how you get that nice, thick, viscous, intense espresso shot, because the method is able to compensate and brew at those lower brewing ratios. Not my favorite cup, but it's always nice to taste bad coffee. Let's rate this one. So even though I know it's not over extracted, I got a lot of bitter notes. So I would say the extraction was everywhere. So it had some bitterness to it over here, but it was also over here. So I know in my mind that this coffee was under extracted because of how I brewed with it, but it had like characteristics of over extractedness too, which was that dryingness. So even though in my mind I know it's over here, it had qualities of this. But I gotta go with my coffee knowledge and instinct and be like, okay, so because of the low brewing ratio and what I've been doing, it's probably under extracted, and those drying aspects of the coffee is just being amplified by the under extraction. So the coffee notes, as in the dark roast notes that are a bit too intense, are just being amplified by the under extractedness. So even though it doesn't have that normal tart, sour feel of under extracted coffee, which comes from a lot of light roasts when you under extract them, I know from my coffee knowledge that this is a under extracted cup. And even though my taste buds say that it was bitter tasting, I'm still confident that it's an under extracted cup. So let's see. So your brew today is over extracted. So yet again, because it's a dark roast, I think that the dryingness of it is not a proper indication of it being over extracted. I think it's under extracted, but the notes that still shine through are being amplified by the under extractedness, and what's being revealed is the roasted notes from more like the roast. So it's not the classic under extractedness where it's sharp and sour. This one's more like dry and dulling, but I do know that from my experience and the way that I changed these variables, it should be under extracted. But maybe I'm wrong here, because maybe there's something happening in the coffee bed because of the way that I changed the filter and stuff, because it didn't like balloon as much as it usually does with quicker filters. So maybe the center area of the bed was being over extracted a lot. So maybe I need to trust my taste buds here and think that there's something wrong with the way the water is interacting with the coffee bed, because it wasn't a perfect like brew either. I could tell that the sides of the coffee bed weren't rising as much as they should be. So maybe the big dose or the filter change made it so that I was only extracting the center of the coffee bed, making it a over extracted cup. Because I am tasting over extracted notes, but my knowledge for coffee is saying because of the low brewing ratio it should be under extracted. Okay, I'm gonna trust my taste buds and say that it's over extracted, and I'm gonna blame it on something in the brewing process. There's something here that is not extracting the beans properly. Maybe the osmotic flow did not work properly this time around because the outside grinds weren't being incorporated with the liquid that was flowing out, making it so that it tasted over extracted. The beans in the center worked too hard. Let me taste it again. Like, let's see if I can find any sour notes in here. Any at all. So it is way more drying than it's mouth puckering. But there is a bit of sourness, but not enough to say that it's under extracted. So I would say it's over extracted and something messed up in the brewing process that made it over extracted. And I need to follow my taste buds and not my presumptions here. So we're back again. This brew was over extracted. Tasted a lot of dry, harsh, like bitter notes. Wasn't pleasant. And even though we were using a low brewing ratio, I think that somewhere in the process I was using too much grinds, or I was using the wrong filter, meaning it wasn't draining fast enough. And it made it so that I was extracting the center beans way more, making this cup over extracted. Initially I would think that it was under extracted because of the low brewing ratio that I'm using, but from my taste buds, I can tell that it's over extracted. As for taste, it was pretty bad. So I would say down over here somewhere. It wasn't pleasant bitternesses or drynesses. It was just harsh everywhere in my mouth. There was no lingering feel. I don't want to sip it and enjoy. It's more like I want to drink water after every sip. So what are we gonna do with this? I want to enjoy a cup of coffee again, and I'm gonna go back up again. We haven't really gone beyond the 1:13 brewing ratio, so why don't we go 1:14 and see what's up. So we're gonna change our brewing ratio to 1:14. We're going back up again, and looking at the recipes that are close up over there, we had a really good one with 20 grams and 260, 20 grams of coffee, 260 grams of water. Let's try to replicate that, but with a slightly higher brewing ratio. So let's see. Yeah. We're changing this to 20 grams. So math, 280 grams of water, 20 times 14. And to compensate, we're gonna bring it back to 80 degrees Celsius again. Like so. And that will be our recipe for tomorrow. So we're gonna use, for our final brew with these beans, a 1:14 brewing ratio, 20 grams of coffee instead of 30. We're gonna use 280 grams of water. It'll be 80 degrees Celsius water. So we've had a good cup kind of in this rain at a 1:13 brewing ratio, but we're just increasing that brewing ratio by 1 to see how that tastes. So this cup over here, I feel like something went wrong. And that happens sometimes. It's totally fine. But trust your taste buds. If it tastes bitter, it's probably bitter. If it's sour and sharp and like, ooh, then it's sour and sharp. But this one was still all bitterness going on here. Yeah. I'm trying to find those sharp qualities, and it's still extremely mellow and drying and bitter. So, yeah. The end of this bag isn't turning out as good as I expected, but that's kind of what happens when you explore and push the boundaries of brewing variables. You can't always have bangers of cups of coffees. And that will be it for today. Thanks for joining. I hope you have a stellar Wednesday. Yeah, Wednesday. And enjoy your coffee. Enjoy your breakfast, lunch, dinner, whatever time it is. And I'll see you all tomorrow, maybe. Take care, everyone. Boop. See ya.